that kind of a scenario need to be clarified in terms of looking at the broader context. We're also looking at the issues that are linked to system quality incentive, to say is that such system quality incentive not overly generous to ESCOM, taking all these points into consideration. And on your slide 37, if you can just explain the drop in the ESCOM generation forecasted in 2019 much more clearly. And then on slide 41, the EAF is, you had used 78, now 75 was your stress test. And then, but what is provided in the other slide is that we're currently sitting around 69. And then why not move to a worst case scenario based on the information that you have at hand? When we look at slide 45, it talks to a lot of, I think they were talking about close to 20,000 megawatt that are not available. 5,000 of which is actually planned outages. And with that kind of a situation, firstly, I want you to confirm that the 1,833 megawatt that is long-term force outage is not in the REB, or is it in, because it is not usable in the intervening period. So I just wanted to clarify that, and also want you argue that the methodology in place would work better if for a well-performing plant or system in terms of performance. So to say that the methodology could be a bit out of kilter, could be a bit out of kilter when one looks to a company like ESCOM that is faced with performance challenges, and how then one compensates for that. And if you can just explain for the public, for the sake of the public, if you can just explain slide 51 with regard to the cash constraints that you said that hampered maintenance. Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Matisa. Mr. Matisa is going to leave us. He has an early flight, but I think we would like to hear his contribution to today's hearing.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And maybe thanks to the ESCOM team for the presentation. I must just apologize. I was sitting in the audience because I've got a flight to catch in literally 5 minutes. But although I've got a lot of detailed questions, let me start at I think the critical element. The picture that was presented by the systems operator, and I think also generation management, doesn't seem to be reflected in the application. For me, I have two questions. Why is it, well, in fact, what would the impact be if you implemented the picture as has been reflected here? In terms of energy availability, I know you said it probably ought to have been in the 71, up to that slide where you're showing the energy availability, which is much lower than the 78%. And the increased use of OCGTs. Can you model for us what changes it would make in your application in terms of the actual numbers? Because it appears that if you now intend to be using a lot more OCGTs, availability factor, the load factors of OCGTs will be higher, and so will be the costs. So if you can explain where that increases the amount that you would have applied for. That's the first thing. The second thing is maybe let's start with your it is truly available. I know you showed a slide that showed about, just under 45,000 megawatts of capacity. But then in one of your detailed slides, you've indicated that certain of the plants, it's about 1,300, is actually no longer available because the cost of maintaining the plant is going to exceed the, maybe I'll take it to the slide, the cost of maintaining the plant will exceed the, I think the benefit of running it. I think it was around 1,300 megawatts. So in reality, those megawatts are no longer available. Now, for planning purposes and for the sake of the systems operator, why is it that you do not go and adjust it in the results that you have? Or let me just state it slightly differently. If you've got, let's say, 1,400 megawatts that are now completely no longer going to be available. I know you use its insurance and this sort of thing. In reality, it's no longer available. It's that capacity is gone. How is it? Why is it that you do not change this plan? Government is doing plannings for the integrated resource plan. It assumes that that capacity is available. It's no longer there. You're giving us a 3-year, multi-year application. Again, we assume it's there, but you still call it insurance. Why don't you just accept? Why don't you accept that you've actually shut down those plants and they will not be available, and therefore the systems is going to be more constrained than it is. And I think the next question that I'd just like to just ask is your maintenance philosophy. Can you just explain it properly? Because your fleet is really aged. Some of your plants are about 50 years old, 55 years old, and is it not correct that in reality, for some of those plants, you've got a philosophy of running them to failure? And let me just repeat it again. Are you running certain of your plants to failure? And how is it incorporated in this plan, as opposed to spending more money on maintenance? Because the difficulty that we have is the whole country seems to think that we've got excess capacity, we shouldn't have load shedding and things of that nature. But in reality, given the facts that you presented, the picture is completely different. Why is it that you're not discussing this with your shareholder? Why is it that you're not, I think, open about it in the in your application? Maybe some of the detailed questions are. So I apologize, I prepared all the answers, and I haven't had the opportunity to ask all the questions, but we'll probably engage a little bit more.
Thank you very much, Mr. Modise, for those questions, and we'll get some more responses from Mr. Mr. Swart.
Thank you, Chairperson. If I can probably just start with the issues around the system operator. So I think it was in slide 12 where you indicated that the system is expected to remain tight for the period of the MYPD 4. However, in your application, there is an indication of under expenditure in terms of capex for both the transmission and distribution facilities. Now, I didn't get a sense that you've got a good handle into the foreseeable future in terms of those assets. A lot of with a lot of focus has been on generation assets and so forth, in terms of maintenance, in terms of investment and all of that. But I would want to get comfort or an understanding of where are we with respect to transmission and distribution, because we don't want to be in the same situation that we have seen with respect to generation. So I think one is expected, well, I expected to get that sense of comfort. Where are we with respect to those assets? Are we doing the maintenance that is expected? What is happening with respect to investment and all of that? So I want to get that feedback, so that if we fix one side of the system, we don't all of a sudden experience challenges with transmission and distribution.
Chair, with respect to generation, I think there's a concern really
with the picture that we are getting. If you look at where we are going with respect to the utilization of OCGTs, an increase from around 1% to 15%, that's quite drastic. And that has got implications really for forthcoming RCA applications and so forth. But if you look at the reasons for the overutilization in the early 2000s, you've indicated that actually was as a result of increased demand. But if you look at the reasons of overutilization as of now, it's not a demand side issue. These are matters that are emanating from ESCOM's own doing with respect to the maintenance that was not done, the midlife refurbishments that have not been done, the investments that have not been done. Now, so we are saying a totally different reason as to the overutilization of plant. And now, the real question really is why then should consumers be, picking the tab? Because understandably in the early 2000s, yes, there was increased demand and probably there was justification. But now the reasons are totally different. They are from the supply side perspective, and yet the consumers are still expected to pick the tab for those. So I think that is where probably the issues are. And I think ESCOM needs to respond to that.
Yeah, and so there was an expectation that with the coming into line of the new plants, there's going to be some relief in the system. But we're not seeing that, and I didn't hear anything being spoken to with respect to the new build or the new plants that have come online. So what is happening there? One did not get any feedback with respect to that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Swanda. Mr. Foley.
Thanks, Chair. So, I've got a few, I think as I listen to your presentation, I'm actually getting a bit more concerned, so maybe you could clarify some of these for me. So on slide number 12, which talks to your emergency measures and the merit order for that. Well, the one thing I wanted to know is what did the asterisk mean next to the VPS? The second question there is, the VPS comes in right at the top and it costs you money. Interruptible load, the ILS, is a last resort just before you go into load shedding pretty much. And that's contractual and you don't pay for it. So why would you use the measure that costs you money first versus the one that doesn't? And then it does seem that the cost of that demand response, the VPS, etc., has pretty much doubled from last year to this year. If you had been using the ILS first instead of VPS, would that have happened, or would it have remained at the levels of the previous year? And then kind of a combined question around a number of the slides around them. Bernard made the comment that you're getting very good at forecasting, and I don't think we doubt that. So maybe you could give us the accuracies within 5% or 10%. Now if we agree that your forecast is quite accurate as the system operator, if I'm correct, the system operator has to approve outages. I mean, generation and ESCOM can't just decide on outages themselves and just tell you what the schedule is. You would need to approve that level. So if the plan was done on 78% availability, stress tested at 75, and you were seeing a 60-odd% availability, you still allowed them to do outages at a 75% or 78% planning level. The question for me is, why did you allow them that level of outage? Because you knew what your reserve was, or the space was, if your forecasting was that accurate. And then does that not mean that we actually planned ourselves into the high OCGT usage as well as load shedding, and we're doing that into the future? And that speaks to the increase in OCGT costs. So the other question I have for the system operator is, I can't remember the amount of reserves you need to keep. It's 10% or something. Well, I don't know how many megawatts, but in an emergency situation, can you indicate to us, there's a requirement for a certain level of reserve, but in terms of our current system, would you be able to manage the system reliably, although with some risk and load shedding in your back pocket, with a lower reserve? And if you could have, why did you not approach the Grid Code Committee or Grid Code Authority to say, as an emergency, I want to reduce my reserves, but I've got these other measures that keep the system stable if we need to? And then you wouldn't have had to use OCGTs and probably still create a space for additional maintenance. And then I've got one final question for the generation people is, you're lamenting the high, what's the EUF, the utilization factor of your assets. But in any you want to switch your assets. You want to run them at a high utilization factor. So I don't understand the complaint, because you want to run it at a high rate because then it's more efficient, you're utilizing your assets. Is it not a case of that you need to prepare for that? I mean, you want to run as business as usual when plant were running at 60%, but you want to utilize them at 80, 90%. Did we not foresee that at some point? Thanks, Chief.
Thank you very much. If you could then come forward. But I think the other area that you need to focus on is the RAB, particularly because you've got plants that are on cold storage. So what you need to explain to us is what does it take to bring or to recall those plants back on the place should you require them to be in use, first of all. And how long will it take? If some of those plants currently are out of service, and you actually say that you use this term, technical term, to say they're on cold storage, and you may recall them at any given point in time, how long would it take? Will they require maintenance? Would it take 12 months? Would it take 18 months to recall those plants? So that is quite important in terms of the RAP, so that we can understand whether such plants, even when they are put on cold storage, whether they can contribute to the provision of the service, number one, and whether we can view them as usable and useful. Because if they are not usable and useful, we cannot include them to the RAB. So, and therefore, we need to make sure that there are some adjustments that are made, as we know that the RAB as it stands now, it is quite high. The second issue that we would like to understand is whether you require Nersa to compensate or reimburse ESCOM for the uneconomic plants, the plants that are not performing. I'll make an example. If Duva Unit 4 has been out of service for quite a long time, and you brought it back on service, and again, there were multiple failures on Dover Unit 4. What does that say about the quality of maintenance conducted by ESCOM, as well as the scoping of that maintenance? We need to understand the nature and the cause of the failures, because you can't have a situation where the plant is out of service for too long, and again, you bring it back and it still cannot perform. That is a problem, and you've spent money on that. So we are still concerned about the quality of maintenance, as well as the scoping of maintenance that is conducted by ESCOM. And the third element or aspect to it is then, how do we treat that particular asset in terms of, you know, rewarding or compensating for such assets? So that is quite important. And the other question that I would like ESCOM to really deal with it is, how long is the long-term forced outage? That for us is quite important, because for the next 3 years, if you say that these specific plants are not going to be on service, then
how soon do we have to respond? So if you lose 3 units, you have to respond immediately. VPS we can call within 10 minutes, sorry, within 2 hours. ILS 10 minutes, so that means we rely on ILS for immediate response. VPS, we schedule it like generation, because we have to give them 2-hour notice, and that obviously gives us some constraint in terms of how quickly we can deploy them. So what you normally find is that if we lose a couple of units, we'll then call up ILS and then respond to them. But if we know that we're going to run short for the evening peak, we will then schedule VPS. So it all depends, Chair, on how quickly we have to respond to the emergency. Then there was a question around forecasting versus outages. Yes, we do forecast demand up to 3 months ahead of time. We do have the final say when it comes to outages. Where system operator has limitations is with regard to safety and statutory outages. Those, unfortunately, because they are legal requirements, we cannot dictate how those should be granted. So that's purely the owner of the power station who decides that this unit has to go out because of the statutory or safety requirements. Then there was a question around the amount of reserves required and why we have not changed that. We have actually changed the way we schedule reserves, because we are not getting the full instantaneous requirements, for example, from ESCOM generation, because of the reasons that have been highlighted earlier. Just to give that as an example, we rely now on demand response. We call it instantaneous demand response, as purely to manage the instantaneous variations. So we have been looking at other options as well.
I think the first thing we need to address is why we have this situation. And that is, if you talk about the lack of capacity and performance, the background and the reasons for it. The high EUF, running the plant very hard, and the vicious circle that you have where that causes more breakdowns, which means less space that you need more the plant to run even more. So the performance challenges of today, although we can always improve, and we are trying to do so, the root cause is not self-inflicted. The root cause is the lack of capacity and the historical being able to build when we would have liked to have built. 80% of it is that. 20% maybe we can take for ESCOM self-inflicted. And the issue of plant reliability, I think we need to look at this from in terms of the plant coming back, etc. We need to look at it from a point of view of prudence and efficiency. And we've said in the presentation a lot about the reasons and the context, and it needs to be taken into account. The context needs to be taken into account. The context of the constrained system, and the root causes that we spoke about. The root causes are external. Yes, we need to take some capability for where we can improve, but taking these external constraints into account, particularly the capacity constraints and the funding, we believe that what we're doing is prudent and efficient.
Sorry, we don't understand that. What do you mean the reasons that you find yourself in this situation is external? What is external? No, I just want to understand what is not. Let me put the question differently. What is not within ESCOM's control in terms of the management of their assets, making sure that the assets are in good condition? We come from this an era where for the past 5 years, ESCOM has been telling us that they have deferred maintenance. And then we will come to a situation, even when we're looking at the RCA for year 1 of the MYPD 3, that at some stage there was then a backlog on maintenance, and it had to be carried out even over weekends. But we don't see improvement. ESCOM seems to be doing the same thing over and over again, and then when they find themselves in these kind of situations, they say, well, we find ourselves in a tight corner, and therefore this is the prudent thing we could ever do. Why is that?
Yes, ESCOM has control over what maintenance we do and when. However, within constraints. For example, one of the questions was asked as to why do we continue to schedule maintenance even though it means high OCGT usage? Because if we don't do that maintenance, performance will be even worse, and we'll get into a declining spiral. So we would like to do even more maintenance, but we don't have the funds to do it, and we don't have the space to do it.
We were informed in some of these public hearings that there was an ambitious plan on maintenance. Hence, maintenance was also done over weekends, number 1. Number 2, part of this question about what is not in ESCOM's control. Are you saying that the quality of maintenance that is done by ESCOM is out of ESCOM's control? Are you telling us that when you take out the plant or the unit out of service for a long time, doing maintenance, bring it back, it doesn't last even a month, and then it suffers multiple failures? You have to take it out again. Now that is the quality. It talks to the quality of maintenance. It talks to the scoping of maintenance. Does this mean that still this is not in ESCOM's control?
Absolutely, we recognize that the quality of maintenance is within ESCOM's control. There are challenges with it that some are externally imposed, but we recognize that it is within our control, and it is one of the elements of the 9-point recovery program to improve both the timing, the scope, and the quality of the maintenance. So we are focusing on it.
Okay. On that score, can you then demonstrate in these applications how ESCOM will take responsibility for the cost of now not having the capacity that is required? For instance, the cost of not having a Dover Unit 4 because it has been out of service, and then money has been spent on maintenance, and then it suffers multiple costs. So how do you take responsibility? So the cost and responsibility part of it, how do you take that into consideration and show it here and say, we take full responsibility, we take accountability, because that's what the regulator wants to see from the utility, taking accountability for the failures that are within your control, and that must be demonstrated. Thank you.
Okay, Chair, I think the reality is in the Group CEO's opening statement in Cape Town. He did acknowledge ESCOM's fault and he apologized. I think that was loud, it was vocal. In all our engagements with our key stakeholders, the reality is culminating in us producing the 9-point plan. We've been very bold, we've been very transparent in confirming exactly those 9 points. And just to reaffirm those 9 points, the very first point that we have is to fix new plant. We've acknowledged that in this period we have a very high dependence on Kusile. When we sat and we did our production plans, there was a need for this new plant to perform. The reality is, as shown in one of the slides, we are not getting the desired reliability from our new performing plants. In terms of the long-term outages, we state very clear that when you start to look at Crookflake 2, when you look at Letaba 5, when you look at Juba 4, and when you look at Creo 2, unfortunately, in terms of the failure, these are long-term, and it hurts the system in terms of unavailability. In terms of the action plan, we've put in task teams to ensure that we accelerate the actual repair of these units. Crookflake 2 has been put into the system. We are looking at getting Juba 4 at the end of February. We are looking at getting Creo 2 at the end of April. And with the last failure, unfortunately, with the Letaba 5 and the severity of the failure, we're looking at about a 12-month lead time. But there's a team, a recovery team, that will ensure through the processes that we actually focus on delivering on time. Getting back to, and it's a point we need to acknowledge, that within the organization, we had a freeze on internal recruitment, and critical to performance, the generation plant performance, is our operating staff. We've highlighted in the generation group the critical staff that needs to be appointed. We've put together a plan, and we've got commitment from both our EXCO as well as our board and the shareholder to support us in getting those critical vacancies fulfilled, actually full. And a point that we also acknowledged was in terms of the stability of leadership. We've not had the stability of leadership. And so there's focus under the leadership of the COO to ensure that the first 2 layers of the generation will be full, starting with appointing the generation executive, and to ensure that 8 of the vacancies, the power station vacancies, are actually full. Then moving on to partials. So just to give you some background and to give comfort to the audience, with regards to partial load losses, if you look at the system should actually, we were trending 2 years ago around 2,500 on partial load losses. We've been trending around 6,000 megawatts on partial, which is totally unacceptable. There was a conscious effort to plan outages over December, and because of the lower demand, we had the opportunity to look at critical maintenance. We planned 33 outages, we achieved 27, leaving us with 7 that we are busy executing. And so just to give you an indication, and that's the commitment we gave to our key stakeholder, was to recover about 1,500 megawatts between December and March. We've managed to recover close to 650 megawatts over December, which is pretty much 1 big unit. Moving on to some of the other critical points, in terms of coal, we know coal, in terms of our stockpiles, we actually had a shortage of our stockpiles, so there's a lot of effort made in building up the stockpiles. Unfortunately, we had some rains in December, so the good work that was done over the last month and a half was depleted. But once again, with the industry opening last week, we are busy recovering our stockpiles. So I think that's just in terms of the recovery plan, just to give you some comfort. With regards to the new plant, I think we have acknowledged that there's some inherent defects, and in terms of the contracting strategy, as much as generation is the line group, we have to work with Group Capital Division, which is the contracting body of the ESCOM business, and through the contractor. And unfortunately, we are caught up in the contracting regime, but there's commitment between ESCOM and the contractor to actually fix these defects.
Okay, we hear all of that. What we are not seeing is the accountability. We hear all of that and the apology, and now coming out and saying we have a problem. The reason we want accountability, it cannot be fair that all these risks and problems, you now transfer them to the consumer. That is the issue here. So we want to see from your side what amount of responsibility and accountability, and that responsibility, cost responsibility and accountability must be reflected in what you are requesting from us. So that is the part that is not coming out, and it's not anywhere here. So we want to hear ESCOM, because remember, the application and the assumptions that are before us and before this audience and people that made comments, it's going to change because of also the presentation that you have done today. They are not going to see a new revised application from ESCOM. So you need to then tell us what is it that you are going to do, so that as we proceed with these hearings, we know exactly what are the areas that are likely to change in what you have requested, in the aspects of the application of these things. So if you encountered problems with the design or the defects in the new build and the delayed investment, the delayed commissioning, the poor quality maintenance, poor scoping of maintenance, and all of those things. So how do you account for that? Why do you say we still need so much money? Why should the consumer be the only one that now picks up that cost and the burden? And ESCOM is not saying, for all of these things, we think that this is the cost that we're going to take out, so that nobody then gets is being charged or being made to pay a cost that they've not caused. But it is out of our own actions. Yes. That's what we need.
Chairperson, yes, like the learnings we've taken on board from the RCA with adjusting the energy conservation, I'll commit that we'll do our numbers, and during this course we will demonstrate and highlight the accountability element that will adjust in the application. But as we also acknowledge here today, we'll do that part, but with the other part there will be some costs that are not in the application that will be transparent and demonstrate and present at these public hearings. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you give a commitment so that we know, and then even from the Nersa team can add all of those questions, so that when you do a revised presentation, revised comprehensive presentation, you can then highlight the elements of the applications that will then change, and the figures and all of that. So can you give us a sense as to by when you think that ESCOM will be in a position to do so? Demonstrate what have you adjusted, what are the new figures that you are putting forward, what are the reasons and the extent of change?
Chairperson, I think we have to do the numbers, but definitely at the first session at Gauteng, we will present it at the latest. So that's what we'll target.
Mr. Kasim, there's a follow-up from Mr. Mkize, and also some of the questions from Mr. Foley were not answered. So it will be important that you touch on those questions. Thank you. Let's just wait for Mr. Mkize for a follow-up, and then you'll attend to some questions that you have not responded to.
Thanks, Chair. So, Kasim, I think part of what I wanted to raise is already raised by the Chair in terms of the accountability. And in terms of looking at the accountability, when we talk ESCOM, we're including the shareholder being government, whatever decisions they take, like decisions of ESCOM, when we look at it from outside as a regulator. And then I hope you are still going to talk to the issue of the REB as indicated concerning when we're presenting in terms of the REB, how then you take accountability for those that are on long-term forced outage, and how then do you change the picture to portray that the capacity is not as portrayed or understood by the public in terms of looking at these losses that you are having, the capacity losses that you are facing. And lastly is that I don't know, because I didn't hear it coming out clearly as to what are you doing as ESCOM about the issue of the decline in sales, because it's going to have an impact in revenue variance. Because when you've got the price going, I mean the tariff going up, and the price going up. But what ultimately you're going to have is that you are going to have less sales, and therefore, no matter how high the price you raise, you're actually digging your own grave, which is the tax barrel that you're talking about. Is to be able to come up clearly on those things for the public and us to understand.
So Chairperson Anderson, the detailed RAB will present taking into this into account, and link to the sailors that detail around the customers and what we're doing, etc. I don't have those detailed answers for today, but we'll do it during the public hearings.
Thanks, Jay. Well, actually, for me it was, Bernard, you didn't answer my question. You said, let me give you an example. In December, you said there's 14.2% of planned outages. That was the level. But in your answer, when I asked you, why did you allow them that, you said, if it's safety and statutory, they make the decision, not you. How much of that 14% was due to safety and statutory, and how much was at your discretion? Because when you do load shedding, you normally say we're going to stage 1 because we are 1,000 megawatts up to 1,000 megawatts short of reserves. And if it's 2,000 or more, it's stage 2, etc. Right? So what I'm saying is, I don't know what, 5% of the system is 2,000 megawatts, something like that? I don't know, in that region? So if you only allow 9% planned, then you wouldn't need it to have load shed theoretically. So I'm asking you, you didn't answer me as to why did you allow them, for example, 14.2%. Was it all statutory and safety? And then the other question you also didn't understand, you didn't answer, where you said you're re-looking at the way you, I don't know, the instantaneous reserves that you're looking at that. The question for me was, for example, if you normally need 3,000 megawatts of instantaneous reserve, can you do with 1? Even though the grid code requires 3, can you not go back and say, this is an emergency situation, we need to create space, this is how we will manage the risk? I mean, this is not a business as usual thing. I'm asking, and you didn't answer that. Chair, sorry, if you'll permit me also, can we just add that, and they can send this to us in writing, in one of the slides, the 9-point plan, you mentioned there are detailed action plans. We don't have those. Can you please send those to us?
You can respond and indicate those areas that you are going to provide a response in writing or further clarity in writing.
I'll start. With regard to the outages, we can provide all the details in terms of the outages. But when we load shed, Chair, this is an immediate need. Remember, outages we schedule ahead of time. So in terms of the process for allowing outages, we may have seen the system that is looking green. But day before or on the day, things do change, leading to us having to implement load shedding. But we will provide the details as to out of the 9% planned outages, how much of that was statutory and safety. But it must be understood that things change from the time we allow outages to the day of operation. And then with regard to changing the requirements for reserves, I think the first point to make is that determining the reserves requirement is a technical engineering judgment, which is based on studies to make sure that we don't compromise grid stability. So we have to keep those reserves at all times. So we have not changed the methodology. In fact, it's even getting harder now with more and more renewables coming onto the grid. And obviously the amount of failures that we're experiencing on the ESCOM generation side. So the example that I used of moving away from ESCOM generation to demand response, it's actually what we have done to try and reduce the reliance on thermal power plants because of reliability, where we're now relying almost entirely with regard to instantaneous reserves on demand response. But we can provide all those details in writing.
I think just to then complement what Bernard has said in terms of the outages, we will definitely give you the details. But I think critical to the generation maintenance is that we plan to do more maintenance consciously in in September, in the summer months, and more specifically in December when the load's lower. So that was the opportunity. And as I said, with regards to the 9-point plan, we will give you a detailed written submission, and you will see in that submission the conscious decision that was made this December as well to do more than the 9%. And as I said, the average for the year is 9%, but when you start to see the trend, in the summer months we push towards the 11 and 12% to make up the average of 9 for the whole year, because the winter months, unfortunately, we cut back on maintenance. The one I think I must, because it was a thread with quite a few of the members, with regards to the stations in terms of the older units that have been shut down, okay? In terms of the costing, it's 11 units. It's going to cost us around 3.4 billion rand if we have to bring all of those units back. And as I said, it's in terms of the justifications, it's about the least economic costs. You're looking at recovery time from the time the decision is made to release the money to actually having the units generate the megawatts. You're looking at least at 12 months. We then also sit with a constraint in terms of resources. So typically at Grootfontein, where you've got 3 units that are shut down, once the decision is made, you're looking at 12, 18, and 24 months to have all 3 units back onto the system. And once again, the constraint downstream would be in terms of the actual resources to do it. These units would require a major general overhaul. Okay? In terms of those units, we have consciously removed them out of the capacity. We formally have communicated with the stakeholder as well as to Nersa in terms of the decision. When the production plan was done, these units have been consciously taken out of the production plan, so they are not in the base, and for dispatch purposes, they are not in the base. It's been also formally communicated to the system operator. Okay, so that was just to give context to that, those 11 units. Out of those 11 units, 2 have been defined as inoperable, NBNA 3 and Juba 3. Okay, Juba 3 unfortunately is not in the application because it's we've removed it off because it's outside the 12-month window.
Okay, just for clarity then, all of these units, like I'm also getting to the question that was asked by Mr. Modise, that these units, even if they're not going to be in operation, they're not usable, they are not useful for the next 3 years, then how did you treat that in the RAB?
With those units, we will demonstrate the details in the RAB. I think in the application, it's Unit 3 that's not in the RAB, but we can confirm that. And if it's not there, again, we will adjust it in the RAB, but also addressing these odd 11 units, etc., and doing the test of the use and usable over the next 12 months. We'll do that. Thank you.
So you will also, you know, in Gauteng. So you will also, just hold on. You will also make an indication of whether or not, if some of them could be brought into service, say 1 or 2. You will also give an indication of the amount that we will put in. Yes. So that when, of course, currently we don't have the detail in the application. Yes. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With regards to these units, there was a comment about run to failure. That's not quite correct. What the point is, we will run them, the water side, we will run them until they reach their dead stop date, which is when they cannot continue to run without major intervention. Okay, the remaining units of these 3 stations.
Okay, we will provide the further details in writing because I think we will need more clarity. We need to, probe further on that. But I think explain exactly what you mean by that, because I think we will apply a different standard from the way that you're looking at it from a technical point of view. So that's why I'm saying that we will not want to get into that debate currently. But if you provide some further details in writing and try to look into it also from the viewpoint of the regulator, apart from just being technical in the way you look at the technical availability and what you would do, but the usefulness and the economic performance of the plant. Thank you. all of the questions, because they haven't answered most of the questions sufficiently. But I'm hoping that the team from Nersa is taking notes on all of those, as well as the team from ESCOM, because we will expect from their side to respond to the questions that they have not answered sufficiently. And these hearings are also recorded, so we also have a transcript so that we can see what ESCOM has not responded to. Members, can we take it like that? Okay. Thank you very much, ESCOM, for the presentation. We now move on to the second presenter, which is Nelson Mandela Bay Business Chamber. The name of Sisnonki Tamona, David Mertens, MC Water, Angus Clark, or Prince Matons. We allocated 15 minutes, but if there's any additional time that is required, we will decide as the panel how much time we can grant. Thank you. Do you have any objections in taking oath?
No, we don't. I don't.
All right, thank you very much. May you please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly declare that the information you're going to share with this panel today will be the truth and the whole truth?
I do.
Thank you. May you please state your full name and your designation at the chamber, please?
My name is MC Potter, and I'm a director with the Business Chamber in Port Elizabeth.
Thank you very much. May I also conduct the oath? May you please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly declare that the information you are going to share with the panel today will be the truth and the whole truth?
I do.
Thank you very much. Please state your name and your designation at the chamber.
I'm David Mertens. I'm Executive Director of a company which is one of the biggest energy users in town, Autocast, and we are also members of the chamber.
Thank you very much. You may start with your presentations.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just as an opening remark, we did address a letter to Nersa asking for additional time, and we did get a response. Thank you. Firstly, just as an overview, the Business Chamber, the way in which we propose to present today is we will first give you an overview of the Business Chamber. We will summarize what the applications mean for the country. We will explain why we reject the applications, and then we will provide our recommendations in regarding to reduction of cost at ESCOM and how to stimulate sales at ESCOM, which we have a two-pronged proposal as to how ESCOM could remedy its current failures. And the Chamber, as a brief snapshot, we have about 700 businesses members. Its members employ over 100,000 people. We effectively the voice of business in Port Elizabeth. The Chamber actively lobbies, represents, and promotes strategic interventions in key focus areas. It is the leading organisation in protecting business interests in relation to electricity tariffs, and we have, as a Chamber, effectively been involved in and influencing electricity tariffs nationally and in the Port Elizabeth area through focused attention and engagement. And you will know from our past presentations that we are very actively involved in this field. Madam Chair, it has already been mentioned, but maybe just as an overview, the applications there are two applications before us today. It is 3 RCA clearing accounts for 15% increases per year, and then the MYPD 3, sorry, I'm confusing it, the MYPD 4 for 3 years at 15% each, and then the MYPD 3 clearing account for an amount of 21.6 billion rand. Nersa has already approved ESCOM's MYPD 3 RCAs for years 2, 3 and 4. That resulted in an approval of 32.7 billion rand, which guarantees an effective increase of 4.41% effective from April 2019. Whatever Nersa will approve in relation to the MYPD4 will be in addition to the 4.4% already approved. If we are to look at the tariff applications in a historic context, the solid green line was the actual ESCOM tariff. The dotted green line is the proposed ESCOM tariff in terms of the MYPD4 application. The red line is the actual PPI, and the dotted red line is the forecasted PPI. The difference between the actual PPI and the actual ESCOM tariff is what we have paid since 2010 to ESCOM in addition to to the production price index increases in order to help them to fix their trouble. Listening to what was presented today, all that money was to no avail. They are still singing the same song as they have sung over the last 5 years during the MYPD3, and they're still claiming the same shortcomings. It is just now in more focus. The application amounts to a further 34.6% above inflation for the MYPD4 period, with the 4.41% already having been approved. What does this mean in rand? What are they asking for in real money? The total revenue applied for over 3 years is almost 800 billion rand, which is an increase over the 3 years involved of 215 billion and above inflation of 145 billion rand. For the Nelson Mandela Bay, they asked for total revenues over the 3 years of 17 billion from the consumers, which is a total increase of 5 billion for the 3 years, of which 3.6% is above, 3.6 billion is above inflation. Households are asked to pay 1.2 billion rand, small business 0.6 billion rand, and industry 1.8 billion rand. If we are to proceed to the ESCOM MYPD4 sales forecast, the solid blue line is the actual sales. The dotted blue lines are the forecasted sales during the MYPD3 and MYPD4 periods forecasted by ESCOM, whilst the dotted green line is our forecasted sale by the business chamber. If you were to look at the MYPD3 period, it is clear that there was a substantial deviation between what ESCOM forecasted, what was approved, and what was actually achieved. If you look at the MYPD4 sales forecast, ESCOM predicts that it will be life as usual and that consumption will remain relatively flat. The Deloitte's report has now made it graphically clear that there's a direct link between the ESCOM prices and the drop-off in the consumption of electricity of about 3% if you average it. And if you were to accept the recommendations of the Deloitte's report, there will be a same discrepancy between the forecasted ESCOM sales and those that we actually experience. And the outcome is quite predictable. ESCOM is going to blame a lack of sales and ask for increased prices, which will result in a further lack of sales. The effects of the application is, to summarize, the utility death spiral in full motion. The Chamber strongly rejects the application, and we recommend that the ESCOM increases must be contained in within inflation to stimulate electricity usage. Madam Chair, on what basis do we as a Chamber reject the application? Firstly, Madam Chair, the objective stated by ESCOM is to provide electricity reliably, safely and securely. On quite frankly, what we have heard today is an embarrassment. It is an abject admission of a failure by Eskom. It is a repeat of what has been done over the last 5 years. Eskom said the grid is telling us something. Well, what is the grid telling us? The grid is telling us, if you were to look at Eskom's presentation, that Eskom is unable to plan. Eskom is unable to stick to any plan that is prescribed to them by Nersa. Eskom is unable to produce electricity reliably despite their objective. Eskom is unable to adhere to Nersa's guidelines. And Eskom is unable to meet its own objectives. The grid is telling us that we are not in safe hands. The presentation by Eskom is a proven failure. Eskom expects the electricity user to pay for its inefficiencies. In a nutshell, the MYPD 4 application provides no leadership, no vision, no ideas, no solutions, and no hope. Einstein used to say insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. Madam Chair, we as a Chamber are delighted to be able to say that there appears to be light at the end of the tunnel, and that light is Nersa's most recent tariff decisions, for which we want to commend Nersa in the way that they have approached it. Eskom's tariff application for 2018-19, they've applied for 19.9%, they were granted 15.23%, and I think Nersa should be applauded for what they have done. Eskom requested for the 3 RCAs which were recently approved 66.7 billion rand. They were granted 32.7 billion. And the reason to curtail Eskom's requests were correctly, we submit, based on the following: corruption and mismanagement at Eskom, Eskom's inability to supply sufficient electricity, delayed and overspent projects, and very importantly, Nersa debunking the myth of electricity price elasticity. There's been this ongoing refrain by Eskom is, put up the prices, people won't use less. There's been a large-scale departure of customers from Eskom moving to alternative energy resources, and it will take them a very, very long time to get those users back because they've invested in alternate capital. Also, Nersa is holding Eskom and its shareholder accountable for irrational decisions, inefficient operations, and non-prudent spending. Nersa was looking at Eskom's financial viability, and Nersa also considered the impact of Eskom's price increases on the economy and Eskom's sales. Thank you for that. The most recent tariff decisions by Nersa curtailed Eskom's increases to inflation level because higher increases, and we quote from the reasons for decision, were not serving the public interest and are not required to ensure Eskom's sustainability. These decisions are a base for an efficient Eskom. Eskom has been ignoring Nersa's decisions consistently. If you were looking at, for example, the 2018-19 financial forecast, quite frankly, what Eskom seems to have been doing, with in great disrespect to Nersa, is to say, we won't ask for permission, but we will apologize later. So we hear this effusive apology in Cape Town that, sorry, we were wrong, we have made a mistake, but please show us the money, give us more money. The Chamber commends the energy regulator for its recent decisions and recommends that Nersa continues along that path. And our recommendations take into account that the energy regulator's future decisions will be in line with the most recent decisions. That's the premise for our presentation. Our recommendations then are twofold. Firstly, reduce ESCOM cost and constrain ESCOM's tariffs within inflation, and we will unpack that, Madam Chair. And secondly, increase sales. Insofar as the recommendations are concerned to reduce costs and constrain ESCOM's tariffs to inflation, firstly, fix ESCOM's efficiencies. We must enforce that in line with the recent Nersa decision and rationalise coal spend. The areas where we must improve or where we make a direct contribution in is to install a culture of payment in the ESCOM customer base. We're not here just to bash ESCOM, but we also want to assist them. Stop ESCOM's reckless capital spending. Customers must pay for recklessly incurred capital spending. Customers pay for inefficient shareholder interventions and political meddling. And customers must not pay for expensive IPP contracts. These are unpacked later. Madam Chair, the last part of my participation in the presentation is to address this panel on how to act on the culture of non-payment. Madam Chair, we are extensively involved in the municipalities where there has been huge dysfunction and non-payment. The one municipality that we are involved in owes ESCOM 3 billion rand. It is an amount that will never be paid by that municipality, but is carried by ESCOM on their balance sheet. The culture of non-payment promotes lawlessness and dysfunctionality, and the local authorities are the main culprits there. To date, there has been no discernible corrective measures despite long-term dysfunction and repeated requests for regulator interventions in these municipalities. Our recommendations in that regard, Madam Chair, is that ESCOM must be empowered to stop the culture of non-payment. We also strongly recommend that Nersa fulfill its duties and disempower non-complying licensees. We recommend, it's in your powers, Madam Chair, and that was confirmed by the Supreme Court of Appeal, that Nersa is entitled to discipline delinquent licensees. We would recommend that you qualify the distribution licenses of delinquent municipalities, and in that way improve the collection rate of ESCOM. And lastly, from my part, Madam Chair, electricity theft, unaccounted losses of electricity supplied by ESCOM to municipalities must be dealt with. Thank you, Madam Chair.
We're not finished yet. Madam Chair, I will continue with recommendations which address ESCOM's tariffs and ESCOM's tariff becoming more palatable. I think one of the biggest aspects which makes this big increase which ESCOM is asking for is actually the capital cost, and we had already a lot of debates about the capital costs. But if you look at it in overall numbers, ESCOM's current installed capacity is 52,000 megawatts. That is in their reports and in the application. That includes all the available capacity from the other suppliers of capacity as well, not only ESCOM. That is available to us as South Africa. The current peak usage is around 35,000, so it really means that we have 50% spare capacity at this point in time. On top of that, we have about 5,700 megawatt capacity coming on stream from Australia and Ukraine, and there's about 3,000 megawatts for IPPs which are coming in as well. So we are talking about 60,000 megawatt capacity availability, which we will have for a 35,000 megawatt peak. So I do not really think, or we don't know about any other country which has this luxury that we have. So for us it's really not understandable why there are all these problems with supply. It can only be complete mismanagement, and I really think ESCOM testified to that. If you then really look at the following graph, on the top you see the capital spending that ESCOM has gone into on a yearly basis from 2007. And about 2009 there were decisions to embark on big expansion projects in Gula, Sile and Medupi. And then from about 2009 ESCOM spent about 50 billion rand a year. And they have kept doing that quite consistently. So also in the application there's a further 50 to 60, 55 billion on average further request for capital spending in the current situation. In the meantime, in 2013, people were very optimistic, and as we have already showed before, there was the dotted line on the bottom, which was the forecast for sales, and then you see the solid line on the bottom, which is the actual. So we had a gap between sales and forecast, but nobody reacted on the capital spend. We just kept spending the same amount of money, the programs didn't change. And really, if you drop your sales by 10%, you start spending less money in capital. To make matters worse, and with what has been presented this morning, really what ESCOM has demonstrated is they have shown nothing for the capital that has been spent. Really, we are still in the same situation as 2009. The 500 billion rand that has already been spent, we don't know where it's gone, and we shouldn't really pay for it. That is our view after what ESCOM has told us this morning. So our recommendations is to reduce the financial burden and to stop capital spending. So all capital spending on new capacity which we don't require should be stopped. Nersa should remove all inefficiently incurred capital spending from the asset base. And as far as we are concerned, it is probably everything that has been spent in the last 10 years. Then we are getting to the inconvenient truth about IPPs. Whether we like IPPs or not, truth is that they are adding 13% on the electricity price given the current application. So that is something that is not affordable to South Africa. The other myth that we want to debunk is that the IPP cost is coming down. Actually, if you look at the application, it's not coming down. At best, it's stable. You see the blue solid line there. ESCOM buys IPP power during the application period. It will be about 2.3 rand per kilowatt hour on average. The own generation cost is the red solid line, and that includes distribution and transmission. The green line for the application is the generation cost. So you see, even at the best point of inflation 22, the IPP cost rand per kilowatt hour, which ESCOM pays to a third party, is more than double the own generation cost. So this IPP program will be costing the consumer 88 billion rand over the period, because ESCOM could self-generate so much cheaper. So for us as a recommendation, we really do not see why we would have to pay for that as consumers. So we think these IPP costs or additional IPP costs must be removed from the tariffs. And again, we have a lot of capacity. We already at a capacity which is more than double of what we need. So we should not invest further at this point in time, only at a point when we need more capacity. The next big point for us is the municipal tariffs. And how, excuse me, I'm going to come back. So all the previous points were regarding costs. Now we also have some actions or recommendations. So beyond the containment of ESCOM's tariffs, how we can increase sales to ESCOM. First point we will discuss is the municipal tariffs. Then reopening large industrial users which have been closed during the period of decline. And then also we want to say something about tariff structures. 41% of ESCOM's sales goes to municipalities. People who buy electricity from municipalities don't get an ESCOM tariff, they get a municipal tariff. Of that 41%, about half is business, and the other half is domestic. That is our estimate. Actually, but more than half is business. You can see some numbers there. The orange, which says 1.02 rand per kilowatt hour, is what an industrial user of with a certain profile will pay if he can buy electricity from ESCOM directly. Then with the municipalities, anything goes. The worst one we found was Madibeng, costing 1.46 cents per kilowatt hour for the same amount of electricity. And the better ones are this municipality, because we obviously have worked with our municipality to reduce tariffs, and the other municipalities are somewhere in the middle. These municipal markups, which we see in these tariffs, that's really the ones we want to address. So we really want to stop excessive municipal markups on municipalities, municipal markups on electricity for the municipal users, because we think it will really help ESCOM growing their business. First of all, we believe the tariffs are unlawful, as they are a revenue-raising mechanism for municipalities. They allow inefficiencies in the municipal distribution function. They distort ESCOM's price signals. ESCOM wants to do something to stimulate usage, but the municipalities will mess it up for ESCOM. So, and then the tariffs are unlawful and violate the Electricity Regulation Act and the electricity pricing policy. And the municipalities, as they stand, we believe they contribute significantly to the decline of ESCOM sales. So our recommendation is for Nersa to instill the same diligence for municipal licensees as they are currently doing for ESCOM. You know, we commended Nersa regarding the latest tariff decisions for ESCOM, but we still have a huge problem when it comes to municipal tariffs. So we really want to urge Nersa to take quick decisions. In the first instance, I think all the tariffs for municipalities which are way too high should be frozen, and they eventually have to come to the same level as the ESCOM direct tariff would be. Another point to address by ESCOM and Nersa. We have lost a lot of large consumers using electricity. ESCOM's large industrial and mining consumers make up about 35% of the usage of sales of ESCOM. So they are really the base which allows then the country to have more cost-effective electricity. Nevertheless, we see that the consumption has been shrinking with about 20% in the last 6 or 7 years. And we would like to urge ESCOM to really talk to these customers which have closed down to revive their usage and stimulate the environment so we can get better electricity tariffs and lower electricity tariffs which can revive the economy. Then tariff structures. The tariff structures which are currently in place are old. They have been there for 20 years. I really think ESCOM should revise them. We had a very positive engagement with ESCOM this year. We looked at a pilot project to address the winter tariffs, because the winter tariffs are very expensive, and we actually had a pilot project here in Nelson Mandela Bay. I think these kind of initiatives will be very positive. And I think there must be engagement with the users to continue these initiatives, so we have more palatable tariff structures. Also, obviously, market conditions change, competition changes, and ESCOM should really look at changing the tariff structures where it is productive to do so. The last thing, this problem is much bigger than ESCOM. There's many role players which are absolutely crucial. There's also Nersa, there's the Department of Energy, there's COGTA, there's Treasury, there's SALGA, there's the Intensive Energy User Group, there's us as municipal users, and we really would propose that there's not only the 10 wise men making decisions, but that there will be engagement with all these parties looking for solutions for this big problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mertens and Mr. Potter. If you could have a piece of paper and a pen, in case there are questions from the members for clarity. I'll start with Mr. Foley.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the presentation. I've got just one question really. On slide number 8, you indicate, I think it's 8, if this application is approved, then one of the lines there is we will further reduce our electricity usage. And then I just want to refer that to slide number 6, where you say the total increase of this application over 3 years to the NMB consumer would be 5 billion rand. Now, if you say that if this increase were to be awarded, you would further reduce, does the Chamber have any idea of that 5 billion, how much would actually materialize? Because obviously if the sales went down, even if the price went up. Can you give us a view or a feeling of the quantum? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Fuller. Mr. Span.
Thank you, Chair. If I can take you to slide 1, it's about 6, where you have your sales forecast. When you show the ESCOM's MYPD sales forecast as unrealistic, and you have your own sales forecast that is actually declining over the MYPD period. I just need to understand, because ESCOM gave us sort of a moderate forecast and then another scenario which is low growth, but both actually showing an increase. Now your forecast is declining quite rapidly. I just need to understand the assumptions that you have made. What factors have you taken into account to actually come up with this kind of picture? I think that will be helpful. Then can you also explain the statement around where you say that the gas and diesel picker stations in PE and Durban will never be used, but they cost about 2.5 billion. Can you just clarify what you mean by that statement? You can just unpack it. Also, you also sort of like lament the use of IPPs and show the cost per kilowatt of power generated. But your graph actually shows that cost is actually declining. Now, would you still maintain your views around IPPs if that cost were sort of like declining over a period of time? Yeah, and then the issue around the large industrial users that have sort of like closed shop. Was this, in your views, really related to electricity tariffs only? And maybe if you can just give us more information around that. Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Smanda, Mr. Mkhize.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thanks to the presenters. I think that as the main actors in terms of socio-economic development, it would also assist where you've got certain figures that talk to that will assist us in terms of the socio-economic economic impact analysis to provide those. For example, if this, let's say, if the application were to be approved as put forth, what would be the impact in terms of jobs, etc., because it has in terms of the economic analysis. And I think that also your capacity figures that you spoke to, maybe you need to chamber them with the presentation that was provided by ESCOM earlier on, because then means effectively they are lower than that. And now I just need clarification for the others. From your side, you are back to the issue of your slide on sales, where there's a reduction of 3% per annum that is from the Deloitte report. I would just like to put that clearly from your side that this is your proposal that you have adopted, because in the previous presentations, some people have suggested that we take the figure and then as put forth and then revise it annually. Some have said in the midterm of the control period, we must go back and just relook everything. Just want you to confirm if this is indeed your proposal, and also to talk to the issues of key assumptions in that Deloitte report. The other question that I have relates to what my colleague has spoken to with regard to that I was a bit puzzled when you say that customers must not pay for expensive IPP contracts. But then you helped me when you kind of explained it later on. But I just want to get clarity, because my understanding is that the IPPs, they are contracted at a particular price, and that price remains constant. And then, whereas what is happening is that the prices for these renewables keeps going down. Are you proposing that consumers only pay for the part that is prevailing at a particular time, and the difference is borne by the shareholder or whoever? I just want you to be clear with what your proposal is in that regard. Yes, I will leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you very much. May I just add one more question? The question is, I would like to just get your views on the increasing debt of ESCOM, particularly if you are considering the challenges that they stated that they are facing. One of them being these, the defects in the new build, for instance, and also the point that you've made earlier on regarding the excessive capex spent by ESCOM. So what is your view, what is your take on this increasing debt of ESCOM, if you take those 2 points into consideration? Thank you.
Just for clarification, Madam Chair, your question relates to how that should be funded.
Yes, that will be part of the question, and also, the causes that give rise, to that debt, and whether that financing of that debt or funding of that debt through the tariffs and as part of this application won't be appropriate.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, just to look at our usage forecast. So we had the dotted green line, which we think is going to be the usage of electricity going down in the 3 years of the application because of the price increases that ESCOM is asking for. And then also ESCOM has forecast the dotted purple line, which is just above that. How did we come to that green line? We have taken, with the application there was a report from Deloitte, and Deloitte has looked at the price elasticity of electricity, and they forecast some numbers. They gave us some numbers. I think it was between 0.2 to 0.5% decrease for every increase of 1% in electricity price at a certain level. So we've taken half of that number, the average, like 0.35, I believe it was 35%, which we would decrease, which ESCOM will decrease in sales for every percentage above inflation, which they are charging the consumer. So if you work out these numbers, it's a very simple graph where you will see that you drop from about 210,000 gigawatt hours to about 180,000 gigawatt hours. So that's about 15% over the period. And we believe that it's really realistically, you see what has happened over the MYPD 3 period. And you know, the more expensive electricity becomes, the more people will respond. So the response will be more and more, especially from industry, as electricity is already expensive. So when electricity was very cheap in 2008, we had these big increases. In the first couple of years, not much happened. Once it reaches a level, then it starts happening. That's also quite clearly described in the Deloitte's report. It's not something that we are inventing here. Then the effect on Port Elizabeth, I think it's very, very difficult. You know, we have quite a lot of users. We have about 350 industrial users. Some of them are obviously high energy users, high intensive. Others are less intensive, but we can really say it'll affect the whole situation with intensive users quite dramatically, and we see things will be very negative if we get this 15%, 20%. That's really unpalatable at the current level. Then Mr. Sibonga, you asked questions about the IPPs, and thanks for asking the questions around the power station in Port Elizabeth. Everybody might be aware there's a power station in PE in Kucha IDZ. It's in the back of Agni Steels. It was commissioned in about 2016. It has 350 megawatt capacity, and yeah, it's a DOE peaker. There's a sister plant in Durban somewhere for about 650 megawatt in total. The capital outlay for that was about 10 billion rand. If you look at the usage profiles and what they are doing with these stations, as far as we can see, there's absolutely nothing happening with these stations. In the forecasting, if you see the IPP plan, which is part of the MYPD4 application, they are used for only 1%. So it really means they are not being used at all. And as far as our knowledge goes, we had load shedding in November and early December. Even during that period, we had load shedding in PE, but that plant that was standing there was not being utilized and not helping us with anything. So the capex, the capital outlay for that plant was about 3.5 billion, and it's 3.5 billion wasted. And I do not know how we can afford that kind of thing in South Africa. And in the IPPs, and the charges for the IPPs put onto Eskom, that these two stations between the Durban one and the PE one cost Eskom and then also the consumers 2.5 billion rand a year. So for nothing, absolutely nothing. Okay, then the next question was the cost is in decline. Mr. Sibana, you said we see the cost going down of the IPPs. And if you look at the graph, first of all, since 2017, the average purchasing cost was about 1.7 per kilowatt hour. These numbers come from the Eskom annual financial statements. It has been going up to almost 2.5 rand. That is for the 2020, that is part of that application. So we see the cost which Eskom will pay per kilowatt hour of IPP power will be 2.5 rand, while the Eskom self-generation cost for that period is about 65 cents or something like that. It's become a correction, but it's very close to that. Yeah, and then it comes slightly down to about 2.2 rand for the last year of the application, but it's still very, very high, and it's still more than what is currently being paid. And you know, the issue is as well is there's so much capacity in this in the electricity supply industry already. Just by creating more capacity, we cannot reduce the cost by creating capacity which nobody needs. Well, then the question on the large energy users, we know there was a proposal, and an approved proposal for the silicon smelters to reopen with a special tariff regime. That is really the kind of initiative we were referring to, and to make sure that large users can actually again produce more and potentially at certain conditions at preferential tariffs.
Madam Chair, I'm going to address the last question by Mr. Mkhize, I think it was. No, that was by the Chair, I beg your pardon. Is the increasing debt of Eskom in relation to build and capex and the financing and causes related thereto. At a very basic level, Madam Chair, and you will be acutely aware of this, the function of Nersa is to approve a tariff that is efficient and allows for the recovery of a reasonable margin or a return. And that's what we are here to do. That tariff is impacted on by the consumers, which can only consume. They have no influence over what Eskom does, how they do it, and how efficiently they do it. However, the tariff is massively impacted upon by, I beg your pardon, by the operations and the operational efficiency of Eskom, and the that efficiency is massively impacted upon by how Eskom conducts its business, and in addition, the decisions taken by the shareholder or imposed by the shareholder on Eskom. When the regulator looks at what is presented to it, it should say, is this a sound decision? And how is that efficient under all those circumstances? If there is a proposal for the long-term build of capacity because the forecasts support such a build, then approving the build, which is Nersa's job, is one part of the decision. But then Nersa would also have an oversight responsibility to ensure that how that build is implemented remains efficient. If either the decision is inefficient or the implementation of the decision is inefficient, Nersa is empowered, and I would submit obliged in terms of the enabling legislation, to pass that cost on to the shareholder, not to the consumer. Because Nersa is the last line of protection between the consumer and Eskom and the shareholder, protecting them from potential abuse or potential mismanagement. Nersa has done that very effectively in the RCA decisions, and we would ask that Nersa continues to do so going into the future, looking at the inefficient build of new capacity, and also insofar as the IPP costs exceed the cost of generation of electricity, because there's no suggestion, if you were to look at these figures, that the introduction of IPPs contribute to an efficient cost for the consumer. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. You have answered it. All right, we thank you very much for your time and for your contributions. We'll certainly take them into consideration, and some of the recommendations that you've made here, we will interact with them further and see what is reasonable within the scope of our mandate. Thank you very much. All right, we are going to take one more presenter before we break for tea, and we have Culture Consciousness Society. We have the name of Somila Gogela, or Gogela, Somila Gogela, for Culture Consciousness Society. Okay, how many people are going to present? Before you speak, you're not going to present the book. Huh?
Sorry, Madam Speaker.
You're not going to present that book?
No, Madam Speaker.
Okay. So
I have 2 cards in the Madam Speaker.
Come again?
I have 2 cards.
2 cards?
No, 2 cards, Madam Speaker.
Oh, okay. All right. I was going to say that we didn't get the copies of that book so that we can see what it is. So, okay. May you please raise your right hand, and you solemnly declare that the facts you're going to present before this panel today will be the truth and the whole truth?
Yes, Madam Speaker.
Please state your full name and your designation at Culture Consciousness Society.
My name is Somila Gogela, and I'm a co-founder of Culture Consciousness Society.
All right, thank you very much. Are you going to share the presentation with the colleague?
Yes, Madam Speaker.
Can I also conduct the whole thing? So, may you please raise your right hand, Puti? Do you solemnly declare that the facts you're going to present before this panel today will be the truth and the whole truth?
I swear.
All right. Can you please state your full name and your capacity at the Consciousness CCS?
My name is Victor Mfekwane. I am co-founder of CCS and its affiliates, Manilande.
Okay, thank you very much. Your time starts now. You've got 15 minutes to do your presentation, and we'll ask questions after that.
Thank you. I would like to start by saying, in the Republic of South Africa, environmental and social justice shall be the departure point of all environmental law, placing the respect of all life, both people and nature, above profits. The immediate reality is that our world is facing the real and present danger of ecological Armageddon. This is as a result of glutinous consumption by a small global elite and the race for profits at all costs. Global warming is real, and its impact is already felt in Africa and other regions which are not greatest polluters like South Africa. All housing must have energy and water efficiency built in to save cost to the residents. All homes must have 200 kilowatts units free basic electricity. No more coal-fired power stations must be built, but rather replaced with solar and other job-creating renewable energy resources for all. Energy-intensive industries must divert profits towards the full cost of energy and water used. The 200 units free basic electricity for all would easily be financed by what Eskom subsidized the big corporations with. Lastly, I'm a young man studying at Russell College and staying with my grandmother, whom we strive with her grant money. To my side, we are already facing an energy poverty because we cannot afford the cost of electricity as in now. So 50% will turn us to be vulnerable. My plea to our leaders is not to grant Eskom 50%. unpaid environmental cost and unpaid environmental cost and escalating and still cost the Mother Earth. ESCOM have no credible response to climate change. We need a just energy transition, a transition to renewable energy. The loans that ESCOM is receiving will end up being paid by us youth. Please do not leave the future generation with the debts to the poor, leaderships, or operation. Environmental degradation that ESCOM is doing to ourselves as youth and the generation to come. That means we are being killed with a slow poison. I'm basing this on the greenhouse gases that ESCOM on the day-to-day energy production is releasing. I hope that was clear. Lastly, I will end by saying responsibility. We all want to enjoy life to the fullest, but in doing this, we all need to keep in mind that every action has a consequence. Activities undertaken by you today will affect you tomorrow. Remain responsible for your actions in order to safeguard the hopes and dreams you have for tomorrow. A sensible mind knows that in the palm of our hands lies the most important asset of all, the future. Thank you.
I would like to firstly to thank Nersa for allowing us this platform. As I've said, culture consciousness is in my area. Now I'm a representative of the people of Sweden in Guanabosle. First, Nersa could have done a little bit better with this information, could have brought this information to the community. This thing of electricity is affecting me most, the poor member of the poor citizen of Port Elizabeth. One, as a poor person, I don't buy a newspaper. The only money I have to buy and make sure that there's food on the table for my children. Now you advertise this thing on the newspapers or on the Nersa website, which I don't have maybe access to the computer. As I've said, I'm a poor citizen of this country. Coming to at least if this could be made available in the notices of my municipality, where I buy the electricity, maybe it could have been better. Coming to the 15% application by ESCOM, my community are completely against it because it affects the current billing system now that they are using is affecting them deeply in their pockets. Now, if ESCOM is asking for another 15% for the next 3 years, it will kill their children, even though the members of my community. People are depending, most of the people in my area, depending on the grants, they are receiving grants. They depending on the grants from the informal settlements. Most of the people there, they depending on the grants, and they have children, their parents, that they left them with their grandmothers. Now ESCOM is asking for another 15% to milk now that little money that they are receiving. Come on, guys, that will be way too much for us now. Another thing that I would like to raise, ESCOM is a state entity. We can buy electricity direct from ESCOM because now the thing that is happening, ESCOM is selling electricity, there's a middleman that's a municipality. When ESCOM gives electricity to the municipality adding something on the top of it. It doesn't come in the same way that the ESCOM is applying, that is selling, that affects me deeper. That puts me deeper under the feet of the business people. That puts the members of that community of mine, that makes them poorer. Now they think that what we are asking for, we want to buy maybe the electricity at the rate of the ESCOM. We want to sell to get a one pricing. We want to get one price for every citizen in that community of mine. on the beginning of the month, we receive, the pricing is different as from the 15th of the month. People, let me make an example. There in my street, if you don't pay water, you will get your electricity cut off. Why the municipality?
Where is your street? Because you talk about Sweet and Guanabushe.
Yes, near Guanabushe.
You live in those areas?
Yes. Now when there's a house there, they are not completely disconnected. They can't afford to be reconnected. The municipality, they say they have to pay 1,000 rand for them to be reconnected to have the electricity. Those people know they are ready, there's raining, they have to go and fetch the woods in order for them to make something, for them to eat. Now Eskom is coming with the 15% again to make them more vulnerable. We don't support this 15% that Eskom is applying for. We can offer them we can offer another options, because there are solutions for all this. Because Eskom is selling the commons, they are selling electricity to the and they say they are supplying the other countries outside of the country. They can use that money for their 15 billion, the 50 billion that they talk about here, but not look at the poor citizens. Now they talk about a beautiful solution here of renewable energy, which would be better. They're talking about independent power producers. Those people are not getting, because they are not, we don't understand their independence. Because now they are producing the power, but they have to resell it to Eskom, then Eskom to determine the price. That affects me over again. Now, I think I've raised my point. I said we fully at least, if there's a real 0%, we don't want to increase at all for this electricity. It's affecting skills us already now. I think I've raised my point. Thank you.
Thank you for your contribution. Thank you for your contribution. I just do not know which area or community of Guanabushe you are representing, because that's my hometown. So I'm not understanding, because I didn't sign on that petition. I'm coming from 144. That's fine. Thank you for your time.
Okay. Yes, I wanted to say these are the views and expressions of the youth from Sweden. Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to break for tea, and it will take 15 minutes. Thank you very much.